So I want to talk about music publishing. Music publishing is a little bit hard to get a handle on because it has a lot of different things that it does. And I think at the end of the day, the biggest thing we have to talk about with music publishing comes down to a couple of components. And if we just easily start to isolate those, what music publishing is ownership to a certain degree. And it's ownership that allows for the following from a publisher, and that is the exploitation of the work plus the funneling of money that's being generated by collecting, and finally distributing those collections. And so money distribution, essentially making sure that everybody that's supposed to be getting paid based upon that, the deals that are involved with the work are there. And so when we talk about music publishing, with music publishing, it like a lot of the ways that this gets done well is being able to have each one of these categories well done, healthy, and built into an organization. And so that brings us into like why music publishing becomes such a big deal, and why it also kind of gets lost in the thick of things. And if we look at just those three, being the reason why the exploitation becomes so important is because they got to sell it. They got to find avenues for sale. So they're looking is like where and how can we sell this at its max? We want to primo this thing up. We want this thing to its max level of sales. And in order to do that, in order to get those dollar signs at the end of the day, we have to work a network of people. So meaning they have to have lots of connections in a lot of different lanes in order to make those deals work. I mean, it seems like it would be super easy to make, one deal here or another deal there. But you have to remember that all these publishers are competing for the same territory. They're all competing for the same real estate. So if everybody's trying to go to radio, we're all fighting for radio. If everybody's trying to go to good examples, like the oldies station. Like think about that. Like an oldies station is part of the overall radio plan for a music publisher once somebody's work gets old enough. But think about that. Like they're going to play what top hits from the 50s, 60s, and 70s. So you're saying for 30 years, there's only so much airtime in a specific day, in a given month, or even in a given year to really get that many rotations. So every publisher is out there trying to promote and push their artist to be the one that's being played the most, right? So you could probably name 5 artists from those eras, but what about the hundreds, if not thousands, of other artists that were around in those eras? Their publishers just don't have the strength to make that move. So there's other ways to do it. So we want to sell, we want to be able to sell it and get it out there. So one of the things that a lot of publishers are out there trying to do is, what other area can we sell it? Well, okay, let's just think about that. The Beatles had this show called Love, and again, the publisher is a big piece of this, where they are just trying, and of course the publishers for the Beatles are the Beatles, but the goal is how do we resell, rebrand, and reintroduce the current population to an artist that's been around for years. And so an easy way to do that is to sell it as some sort of musical or theatrical show. And in the case of Love, essentially it's masters from the Beatles that you won't hear in any other way, shape, or form that you do at this show, tied in with visual elements that are happening on stage. I could tell you, those visual elements are part of what draw people because it makes that show more alive. But for like audiophiles like me, it's like I'd rather just sit in the chair in the dark and listen to the content. I'd rather not even bother to see it, but I'd absolutely go to the show just for that opportunity, just to hear it in a new way. But again, they're reselling and they're rebranding. So like you think about Mamma Mia, and you think about what that did for ABBA, it's a group that had already been a legacy artist that all of a sudden comes out of the woodwork and is popular and back in demand. And so finding ways to resell and rebrand. Now the Beatles have done this numerous ways. They have, children's shows that are introducing the next generation of people into their work. So like little kids are out there singing "Hey Jude," and it's like literally like the smartest branding possible. Resell, rebrand, repackage, and get people back into it. And you'll notice that every time there's a new format, as soon as we went to MP3, everybody needed the digital format of the Beatles collection. And once we go to Tidal, we see that same scenario. It's it's being launched on these platforms, and it's a big deal. And so the publisher's job is essentially to campaign around a single idea that makes that thing have new life. Okay, and so like one of the things that I love about a publisher, real publishers, and being able to do that is they have the ability to do it. And it's a team, okay? And I think that that's the biggest key for me is it's like, when we're talking, why have a publisher if I can be my own publisher? And the one thing that I always think about is how many people are you going to hire as your own publisher? How many people are going to be part of your organization? If you even take that one step further in that team idea, there's a global team, and that creates, even crazier, opportunities, so like all of a sudden we're thinking, wow, like it's a team, but it's a team that's not just in one city. They're not just in, one country. They're not fixed in that way, area or form, which means that like while you sleep, while you're over here sleeping, there's a team of people on the other side of the world that are out there daily promoting and moving that work. And so like that is huge. So when we think about a publisher, the first job of that publisher is to exploit and move that work, rebrand it, reposition it, get it out there for the lifetime of that work. The other part that they work on is then when they're dealing with all of this, they have to find a way to draw it all back so that all that money makes it in. Now, the biggest issue that I see with this is that when it comes down to it, you need accountants to do the money movement. At any big business, at any successful business, the CEO is not doing the accounting. The CEO is not counting the dollars. I mean, they can count the dollars that they have in their secret vault. So maybe they're counting their gold bricks somewhere, but they're not going to do the accounting. Because once they spend their time and energy doing that, they're no longer being the head of their organization. Once the artist is bogged down counting money, trying to figure out stats and numbers, they're not able to do the job that they really want to do. Making the music, generating the music. The bad side about music being a business is that it requires a business mind in order to effectively do the business. The good news is there are professionals in the industry that handle all of that because that's what the music industry is for. And so like if you really think about that, if we weighed this out, I would say that in order to effectively make that work, what percentage of our entire piece of the pie is actually musical is probably right here. And then and then everybody else that's doing it. These are the business professionals. They may know music, they may love music, but they're not going to be out there writing motifs, landing a Picardy third. They don't care about that stuff. That's not their world. Their world is some of them are handshakers, they're meeting takers, they are negotiators, they're going to be out there counting the dollars. They're going to be working the process. But I mean, like, if you've ever been a part of a bigger business, you realize that there are individuals that are auditors for the contracts that their only job is to read the contract, review the contract, and make sure that the contract is being fulfilled. And so you need those people, and that's part of what the publishing brings to the table. So when we think about that collection process, we start to see a funnel of something called admin. And you'll hear this a lot in terms of the publishing world, but publishing has two facets of admin, and that is collection and then distribution. And I'm talking distribution of funds, not distribution of, the work. So they're not out there working DistroKid. They're focusing on collection and distribution to who it belongs to. Part of the biggest reason that is so important is because when it comes down to doing taxes, they have to be able to show who has what money and where it came from. So think about that. In the collection and the distribution process, there are forms, there are contracts, there are signatures. I mean, think about this. This is a full-time job, and if you want your music to be successful, you can't just sign one form a day, look at one contract a day, receive one payment a day. You're never going to make it. You know, you need an effective agency that's doing this consistently, that's out there, you know, working new connections, but also collecting from those connections. So on the front end, you're seeing the exploitation, the connection, the networking. But if no one's ever out there bringing those dollars in, there are no dollars, right? So because it's pretty easy for everybody to just walk away with the money. And so like this is a big piece of what that looks like. And that last part, the distribution, they got to take that money and it has to go to all of the appropriate parties. It has to get out there effectively to all of the appropriate parties in the appropriate way. So just just like being a part of any other business organization, you know, you as an artist will receive payments. You're going to receive breakdowns. You're going to receive stats. So you're going to see not only the money, but you're going to see the accounting breakdown. And so you're going to get every piece of the information in the records, you know, that are needed there. So you're going to see all of the analytics that go along with it, and every breakdown that comes with that monetized field in order to help you make decisions about what's next. How's it working? Now, all of this, if you really think about it, the biggest thing that this takes time. To yield any real revenue, it requires time because, you know, we have to make the deals. We have to negotiate the deals. We actually have to complete the deal, right? So we have to follow the follow through. And then from there, we have this whole other level of, okay, now we have to start looking at our returns. We actually have to start looking at, you know, the money coming in. And then we have to audit it to make sure it's okay and it's correct. And then all of a sudden, everybody's getting paid. So by the time all this stuff comes through, we have a lot of things that are going on. Now, the last piece that we really have to focus on here in terms of publishing is the way that the royalties break out in the deal itself. So, you know, the royalties, when it comes to publishing, where are the payments coming from? How are they coming? So, first of all, the publishers are out there, you know, working on licenses, and this could be any number of mechanical, performance. I mean, the whole list is there. You know, mechanical, performance, sync. Print. And the list kind of goes on, you know, what if they want to work on sponsorships. You know, those are huge, you know, that's all coming from the license itself. And then there's how they return, and that becomes the next piece is like, okay, not all of these are up front. Some of these are up front. Some of these are PRO based. So depending on what kind of deals they're out there making, tells us what, you know, which ones are which. You know, so radio is on the back. TV is a split, right? Depending on sponsorships, depending on what the sponsorship is, sponsors could be here only. And, you know, whatever deals are being made there, you know, has that. Now, the mechanical has a couple of facets, but the mechanical can be in both sales and in the PRO, performance royalty. So in mechanical land, we have, you know, sales and performance royalties. well, and I'll say, and we have our publishing royalty, but we also have, if we're that mechanical license is for somebody else to cover the song, that someone covers the song, and those also pay in that same method. So how many variations of this work do we have? The publisher has to keep track of that and know how to pay, who's getting, paid from where. Once you enhance that by having it in a global market, the funnel of payment is coming from everywhere. But if that one song is being covered multiple times, we have all of these instances that now all have to be tracked. They all have to be tracked. They all have to be reported. They all have to funnel in, and they all have to have some sort of license type in order to then know what are we going to do and how are we going to pay it to whoever the earners are. And so it makes for a really big process in this. Now, the last piece is, I do have one more piece to this, and that's ownership. In the ownership pool, it's absolutely typical for publishing to be 50-50. And what'll happen is the artist will keep 50 and the publisher will keep 50. But there's also times where we have to have multiple publishers to do the appropriate job, remembering that part of the publisher's job is the exploitation. Sometimes publishers aren't doing a great job, or they don't have all their bases covered, so maybe a publisher focuses on one or two specific main threads of things that they do. And so that's when additional publishers can come along. And that could be set up in a number of ways. It could be, a 50-25-25, or it could be, set up in a way where even the 50-50, where even a 50-50 isn't really owned by the artist. Maybe it's two separate publishers that are doing a 50-50. When we have a 50-50, this is called co-publishing. Okay, so or any split at all, when we're sharing publishing ownership responsibilities and rights, it's called co-publishing. And there's times when the publisher has no ability to operate or do work in their own in external countries, and so they have to hire a sub-publisher for foreign publishing. So this is out of country. And what happens here is, in that split, the funnel and percentage and the rates fall underneath the publisher. So instead of this being a 50-50, it's called a sub-publisher, and essentially when it all works out together, if the artist had a 50-50, then the artist has their 50, the publisher has their 50, and then from that 50, we get splits out to subs. So it's important to consider that the sub-publishing falls under the splits of the publisher, and they don't steal away from splits from the artist unless there was a plan or some set term that allows it to do that. Now, in order to get this done, in a lot of cases, full publishing is going to mean signing off copyrights. So a lot of times, in order to get the publishing deal, you have to sign away your Circle C. And it may just be for PA. The record label could have taken SR. Depends on which combination that you want to see that in, or whatever the deal entails. But once that's signed away, it's signed away for its lifetime of the copyright, typically. Unless there's some sort of plan to buy it back, or some sort of plan to have it transfer after a certain period of time, the publisher usually signs it for life. And that's what makes being a publisher legit, is that the publisher could sign on, 10 new artists a year, or even if I just said 10 songs a year, if that publisher lives, and the publisher's a business, it's not just a person, if that publisher exists, for 50 years, now all of a sudden with that 10 a year model, we have 500 works. If instead we blew that up, and we did way more than that, if you know what I mean, and you could imagine if every year the publisher was signing on 1,000 works a year, and we go put that into perspective, now you can see that if they have those works that are moving and they're making good money off of those, that builds essentially a publishing kingdom. And because the publisher owns that work for its lifespan, it's going to continue to snowball. It's going to continue to work. Now, the publisher has to do something with it in order for it to work. Because I've had a lot of people come to me and say, I'm starting my own publishing company. And it's like, that's great. How are you funding it? What's your business model? What does that look like? It's not as simple. It's not distribution. I think that's the big thing. It's not distribution. It's not just I have a work and I'm putting it on somewhere. It's no, you got to go out there and put it in everywhere. You know what I mean? And not just today, but also tomorrow. How do you repackage it? How are you remarketing it? Finding new ways to find lanes to place it. And that is the model that has to be used for publishing to make sense, for publishing to make money, for publishing to really work. Because a lot of times an artist will say, hey, a publisher approached me. Should I sign or should I not? Well, you have to look at what are they offering? What are they going to do? Do they visibly have the ability to exploit and take you to that next level? Because if they don't, and they're just a publisher, they have a website, but they're not showing, there's nothing else they can really show you, they're not really in the game. You know what I mean? They have to have connections. They have to have the right relationships. Even if the publisher they're best friends with Tim Cook, that's enough. If we can get stuff to move on Apple, great, let's do it. That's a big deal. But without those kinds of relationships, it's not really a publisher. It's not really doing what it should do, and it might not be worth signing, that kind of deal over. And I think that's the biggest thing. Is we look back at those three elements are the most important, and they essentially map out what should be happening inside of publishing. That publishing plan really has to focus on, the exploitation of and the distribution, the collection of the funding and the distribution of the funding. And without those big three, we really don't have the right publishing model, So, and that's music publishing.